Hey everybody, I'm Carly Smith and I'm a member of the Creative Paperclay design team. I'm here today to talk to you about Creative Paperclay. It's a modeling compound, but we're going to have fun making this little owl. Some of the things about Creative Paperclay that make it so good is that it's soft, it air hardens, there's no need for an oven. It's very moldable. It's soft from the get-go. When you take it out of the package, it's already soft for you, and you can start molding it right away. You don't have to warm it up in your hand and knead something that's very stiff and hard into something soft. And that's very good news for children, arthritis sufferers, people that have pain in their hands. It opens up a whole new world for you. So the other thing we're going to do is have fun, and we're going to make this little owl. The first thing we're going to do is pick up our egg and examine it. It's very important that you put the broad side of the egg up. The pointy side of the egg goes down. If you do it the other way around, you have a crow, but we're making an owl. So we must have the fat side up. You first take your thumbs, just like this, and what you're going to do is indent, but you're not going to make a huge or deep indentation. Just a little bit like that. Okay? Can you see that pretty well? It's not real deep. There's space right here is about 1/2 inch. That's what you do before you apply your clay. It helps a lot in holding the dishes that go around the eyes in the right spot for later. So without any more being said, we're going to open up our paper clay. This is a package that I've had opened before. So what I have inside of it is a wet napkin or paper towel to help keep it moist. I'm just going to reach down in here and grab a little fistful of it, because we're going to make the cover for the egg, and that takes a bit. So I've got this. Look how soft that is. I just squeeze and it. I'm going to knead the clay, because even Creative Paperclay needs a little bit of kneading. And when you take it and you separate it, if you see cracks like this, you need to put just a little bit more water in it than it comes with naturally. I rub it around and then I just start kneading again. And it's probably all I'm going to need. That's kind of funny. We're using knead and knead. It's been a little bit stubborn, probably because I've had it open. Roll it into a ball, or kind of a flat ball, because we're going to make a pancake now. Squish and flatten. Flatten, especially squish the middle, because you don't want your middle to be too fat. Once you get it about this level, it's nice to get a little rolling pin, and I just use one of my sculpting tools. It has a nice wooden, oops, I don't want to spill my water. It has a nice straight wooden area on it that you can easily use for rolling out your clay. Don't try to do too much at one time, just a little bit at a time. And we're going to roll it until it gets about 1/8 of an inch thick. Paying close attention to keeping the middle, and you can feel if it's too fat or thick by doing this. Rolling it out till we've got it looking kind of like an egg. Then lift it gently. Try to peel it all back at once. Sometimes a little bit of it will stick behind. when you're first working with it. That's okay. You just pick it up like this. Okay, so now we've got our clay ready for covering, and what we'll do is we'll stick it in water. Water is your glue. That's going to be my mantra as we go through this, because if you forget your water, your clay will not stick. Place it over the area that you indented with plenty of room to cover the rest of the head, and then start smoothing down like this. And look how easy that is. You're going to smooth it all down like that first, and if it needs it, you put a little more water on your thumb to make it really slide nice and easy. And you might get to where you have a little too much clay at the end, so you can just break that off, because we're not going to be dealing with that part of it right now. And certain little spots can be always covered up later. I'm just concerned about getting this part done right now. So take your hands and smooth your area that you've covered. And now we want to address our edges. You can see that edge is higher than this edge, so on and so forth. What you want to do is just take a little water and start smoothing your edges fairly flat, because you're going to have to meet and approximate another piece of clay up to these edges, and you don't want to have a fat spot. So just smooth them in, and of course that's going to affect your front, so re-smooth as you go, and just get the edges really flat and smooth. You can see it's nice and soft. It takes every little indentation that I put on it. And we're only going to work on the front side right now, because if you work on both sides at once, it just becomes a mess. You roll it over to do something and you mess up the front side. You roll it over to do the other side and you mess up the back side. So I like to dry my front side before I work on the back side. There, we have it covered. All right, remember we had this little scrap of clay. Don't let it sit out too long, because it'll dry and you can't use it. Pick it up, roll it into a ball. We're going to make the ears, or tufts rather, of feathers that are on the top of an owl's head, of a great horned owl's head. So this ball is not quite big enough. We need it to be about 1 inch. So I'm going to get a little bit more clay out. Just a little bit more. And we have to knead that. Roll it around. It should be good and ready. Now what you're going to do throughout this tutorial when you make your balls like this is you're going to cut them in half. I have this very expensive handy little tool called a straight pin. This is a straight corsage pin. It's extra long, more so than the ones you sew with, and that's one reason I like it. It's my main cutting tool. Put it in the half, or rather put it in the middle of your ball and slowly press it down, and then at the end you can pull out so you make a clean cut. And there you have 2 equal pieces. And that is going to make sure that your ears are not lopsided or one bigger than the other. After that, I'm going to take and I'm going to shape them into the shape of the tufts. So I'm going to start, be still. I'm going to start by making kind of a teardrop shape. And then I'm going to start stretching it, just a little bit at a time, teasing it into the shape that I want, because it's going to go up like this for an ear. What you can do is make your other one while this one's laying here in front of you so that you can compare them So I'm going to go ahead and shape it and stretch it. It won't be out so long as to need to be covered. See if I got them about the same size. I need this one to be a little fatter down at the bottom. But you don't have to be exact on this. This is a little primitive owl. We're not trying to get porcelain here. In fact, some of your imperfections actually make the owl better. When you'll find out when you stain it and the imperfections catch the stain, it gives a nice aged look to the owl. Okay, now I've got my ears. I'm going to what? Water is my glue. I'm going to dip the part I'm going to attach. And I'm going to press. And smooth, press, smooth. I'm very handsy. I do a lot of my sculpting with just my hands. A lot of people use tools. I do use a few tools. See, that's starting to look more like him? Right there. These two pieces actually kind of meet in the middle once you have stretched them and pressed them into place. And any smoothing that we don't get perfect will be sanded until it is. Okay? And you can work on that a little longer and get it a little more perfect. Make sure don't forget about your back sides. Never forget about your back sides. Make sure they're a little bit pointy, but not too much. Stretch this one a little farther. And turn him up a little bit so he looks kind of alert. All I'm doing here is a final smoothing. And I'm thinning my ears just a little bit. They looked a little thick on the sides. So I'm squishing them a little bit. And after you're satisfied with that, and your front is nice and smooth, like this, we're going to let the clay dry. It works better to make the clay dry before you do other parts, and you've got parts sticking out like this that maybe I'm working on the eye and I hit this and I unshape it, for lack of a better word. So with things fairly dry, you can go on to the next step. And speaking of drying, you can just set it in front of a fan if you want to speed it up a little bit. A lot of people use a halogen oven. I have not yet, but I hear they're really a neat thing to use. Walmart sells them for about $45, so pretty soon I'm going to go down there and get me one. And that's just for speeding up. You don't have to have an oven at all. Alright, now some time has passed overnight since we made the first part of our owl. We've got the covering on, the eyes indented, and the ears. It's time to sand. You don't always have to sand at this stage, but we're going to, because when we put on the appliques for the wings and the chest, you don't want to have to sand in between them. That's very tedious. So I'm going to cut some of that down by sanding the owl at this stage. We're not going to worry about our back. I may even let you go alone on that because you've seen how to roll it out and cover a space. And that's all that's going to be needed for the back of this, because we're going to do the whole front first. Alright, we're going to talk about sanding sponges. They're really the best thing to sand with. And they're washable. So I get these from KemperDolls.com. And this set comes in, it's not really a set, I think you have to order each one, I'm not positive, but the higher the grit, the finer the sand. So your low grit, which with here is a 120, 180, as opposed to your very fine grit at 600 to 500. And that's for when you get down to getting things smoother. So we've got our sanding sponges, and here's just an example of another kind. It's got a thicker sponge on it. Don't know why, but you use them the same way. I just prefer the blue ones. All right, first I'm going to use the roughest one. The roughest one because I've got what I call knockoff. I've got little areas here where the clay is sticking up or there's a little extra on it, and you're just going to knock that off with the highest grit that you have. Sanding like so. You don't have to do a whole lot with the knockoff. Just mainly go over it in a rough way. And I'll show you my little sneaky thing that I do to keep the dust from going everywhere, so that I can stay in the air conditioning and sand in the house. That sounds horrible, doesn't it? But if you do this very lightly with a damp cloth and just wipe it off, there goes your dust. Okay? Pick up your next grit and go over the owl. You're going to do the whole owl. It's not to knock off things, extra pieces of clay or uneven areas. This is just the start of our smoothing. We're smoothing the owl out so that when he's painted, it looks good. So get all of your edges. Now, because I'm mostly a primitive artist, I don't have to get it porcelain smooth for my taste. It's a personal thing, so you can sand more or less. It's up to you how you want to do your art. Wipe again, just a little bit. You don't want to get it wet. Now this is my finest sanding, and this is, like I said before, this is 600 to 500, and that's my highest number, which is my finest sander. And this one I'm going to press a little harder and just enjoy that smoothness that it gives the clay. You can see it as you go. You can see how smooth things get. Go into the eyes a little bit. Those aren't going to show, but I just feel they need a little sanding. And then I'm going to wipe and I'm going to feel it and see how smooth it feels. If it feels really smooth, and it does to me, take it and wipe it down and just rub it with the wet cloth. That's going to smooth. That's almost a type of sanding. And I learned this at a doll seminar by Anki Dannon. If you wipe over your piece like this, it will wind up being smoother because I am putting pressure on it. Now, I don't know if you can tell that, but it's very smooth. See there? That's your sanding. You're gonna, when you cover your back, you're gonna sand it too, okay? But right now, we're not concerned about the back. We've done our sanding. All right, we've got our sanding done and we're ready for the eyes. Now, when you're sculpting your owl, you're gonna get really frustrated if it keeps going like that every time you let go to do something with another piece of clay. So I have a very expensive tool that I use, and I say expensive jokingly. This is a Ronald McDonald's cup holder that you get anytime you go and get Cokes from McDonald's. But look what it does. Ta-da! My owl's not going to go anywhere. And if you're working on larger pieces that have heads, these hold them very nicely. So that's just my little tip of the day. See how I compose him and I can work on him? Very easy. Now I've pre-rolled over here some clay balls in the right sizes that we need. And I've put them on top of a damp paper towel with a damp cloth over them to keep them from drying out while I'm working on the different portions. The first one I'm going to pick up is a large English pea. That's a pretty large pea. Can you get that size there? Maybe close to a 1/2 inch, but not quite. All right. And you're going to cut it in half because you want each of your eyes to be about the same size. So here I am. I'm going to just cut it right down the middle. And the one that I'm not working with, I'll put under the damp cloth to keep it safe. And now we're just going to mold this with our fingers into a circle and press it flat. Just keep pressing it out. And all owls are not created equally. Some will have larger dishes for their eyes and some will have smaller. Just depends on the size of your pea. It's not a real big deal. But we're going to get it in kind of a dish shape and curl up the edges a little bit before we apply it. Okay? So that's a nice little piece for the first one. And we're going to use our glue, which is water. And we're going to just set that into this area, this indentation, and press it in. There's a little crack there I'm smoothing out. Like that. There you go. That's one. We'll go back under here and get our other piece and do the same thing. It's just a repeat. I'm going to start smushing it. Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned, this is, that I'm sculpting on, is a glass or acrylic, you can use either one, cutting tray. Now I'm not using the bumpy side, I'm using the smooth side, so it's upside down for a cutting tray. But it's perfect for sculpting. I'm going to try to get this a little more round. Just press it out, cup it a little bit as you go, but it will cup when you put it into the indentation too. Let's see if we've got it big enough. Not quite, it's a little bit smaller than the other one. So what I'm going to do then is press it out just a little bit more to make it larger. And it's still wet and this is still wet. So I can go ahead and put that on. And make sure it indents. And has a cup-like shape to it. See there? That's all there is to it. Then we're going to go for our little English pea, about that size, and we're going to cut it in half, just like we did before. And I believe this one I cut in half again because I decided that was a little too big for pupils. So put the other half aside so you can use it later if you need it. And now cut this one in half. It's a little bit tiny, a little hard for these clumsy fingers. There we go. Now I'm going to roll it into a little ball and just press it into, whoops, that one wasn't very round, was it? Roll it into a little ball in my hand and just press it. There's a nice little pupil. Or that's really the iris. The pupil we're gonna draw on with a marker. So this is really your iris of your eye. I was a nurse, so I kind of tend to apply these things when I'm working. Now I'm going to do the second one. Roll it in a little ball and press it. If you're not happy with how it turns out, just roll it back into a ball again and make your ball a little prettier, and your pressing will come out prettier. Get it wet and attach it and press it in. Believe me, it will stick. Okay, can you see that? We're getting somewhere now. Now, while this is malleable and moist, we're going to take our corsage pen or straight pen, and we're going to make these little lines around that you can see in the picture of the owl when you signed on for this journey. I'm just going to go around like that, making kind of a starburst pattern around the eye. And I'm going to do this side. It's kind of a press and pull. Press, pull out. Press, pull out. Press, pull out. Just like that. There we go. That's all that there is to the eyes before you paint them. No sanding is necessary. There's a couple of little places here that I might knock off later, but it's not a big deal. We're going to go on to the nose. Excuse me a second. There we go. Now this really, I rolled it all up and I looked at it and I thought, this looks too big for a nose. I bet I only used half of that. So I'm going to cut this big ball in half. Remember, you can always use this half, cut it in half, and use it for 2 equal parts of something. So put it under the damp cloth. Don't let it dry out. Okay, this is my nose. I'm going to shape it down into a point on the bottom and flatten it a little bit on the top. And I think it's still a little bit too thick here. You see how wide his nose is from the side? So all you have to do then, when you're getting the right shape, is to lay it on its side and take a slice out of the back of it with our very expensive, hard to find cutting tool, a pen. Now, feeling like it's a little bit long, so I'm going to squish it a little bit that way. Hold it up and see how it looks. Pretty good. What do you think? I think it's fantastic. Get some water on the back of your nose, and we're going to apply it onto the space between the eyes. See that? Now I'm going to press the edges in a little bit. That will help it adhere, but not much is needed to hold it in place. Really isn't. I'm very handsy. I don't use a lot of instruments. I use a few. And here's one right now. We're going to take a damp Q-tip, because this dry one will stick to the clay. And we're going to press the nose out up here. See that? What we're getting? We're getting a spot for the nostrils. And you can neaten it up a little bit with the Q-tip, sculpt a little bit with it. This one's not as deep as the other one. Something I haven't mentioned yet is using paintbrushes is very helpful when you're sculpting for smoothing things, just like this. Smooth it down. If something looks a little rough, like over here, you can just apply a little water to the paintbrush. There we go, there. Now I'm going to take a sharp pointy object, if I can find one. Here's one. And I'm just going to make little holes in the middle so that when you stain, that catches. It makes a little dark spot. You might not be able to see the little holes, but it does show up with the stain. So there you have the nose. We're going to set this aside and let it dry some in front of the fan while we make our templates for our chest and our wings. All right, we're ready to make our templates. And what I wanted to show you is that look at my hands. They've got crusty stuff all over them and aren't getting very fun to work with. So that's why we have baby wipes. They're used to clean your glass surface, clean your hands, whatever you need to wipe down to keep going. So I'm going to clean up a little bit before I handle the paper. See, just like that. It comes off very easy. If you get it before it builds up too much, otherwise your hand is going to become a sculpture. And you won't be able to bend your fingers anymore. Okay, so throw that into the garbage. Let them dry a little bit. And we're ready to begin. I've cheated a little bit and pre-drawn the chest plate. Why is my paper in half? That's a good question. I'm using lined paper so that I can make sure that everything is balanced. I've drawn on school paper ever since I started doing patterns. It was all there was around the house when the boys were little, and I just picked it up and used it. Now I can't draw a thing without it. If it's a blank piece of paper, forget it. I can't draw a curve to save my life. My husband says that I've started using these spaces as a measuring tool in my brain. I don't know about that, but maybe so. So the reason you start on a half a sheet of paper is so when you cut this out, you're going to have a mirrored image on the other side that's exactly the same as this side. I left my first sketch in there to show you that there's no harm in starting out somewhere and going somewhere else and getting a little bigger where you think you need to. Okay. And I'm just going to cut this out. And this is our chest plate. As you get to the middle, make sure you straighten out. You don't want a little pointy thing in the middle of your chest. Open it up. Take your owl. And see if it's right. It's a little big. I think it's a little deep. And maybe a little bit wide. So I'm going to fold it in half. Let my owl down for a second. And I'm going to draw what I'm going to cut off. I'm going to make it a little shallower here and not as wide. So I'm just going to come in here like that. Now I'm going to recut. Hopefully I didn't cut too much, because then I'll feel embarrassed and have to do it over. There we go. That looks just right. There's your chest plate. That's what you're going to use to put your feathers on when it's in clay. Now you say, how am I going to make the wings that go on the sides? Well, once you have a good curve, use it again. Now the wing is not symmetrical on either side, so it's not going to matter that you do the whole wing and you don't use a half a sheet. But what I'm going to do here is use the curve that I've created with my chest plate so that things look a little consistent. So I'm going to use this curve on the top. I want my wing to be a little longer than it, so I come out. And then I come down about as deep as this is. And I just make a wing. And it's a wing that I can adjust according to what it looks like when I cut it out and it's on the owl. So as you can see, folding your paper in half won't work for the wing, but it works to give you a very good beginning with your chest plate and a curve for your wings. Now we're just going to cut that out. Actually, I'm going to have 2 wings, and you don't need 2 wings unless you ruin one while you're tracing it. You have a spare, which is a good idea sometimes, especially when you're first doing it. So I'll just take one of these I don't need. It'll come apart for me. And of course it's not sticking together. There we go. Okay, set one aside. We're done with this. And we have our wing template. Let's put this on. And hold this up. And it's a little bit long. I want it to stop about here. As you can see, I have styrofoam right here. Normally, I would go back and cover that, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to put this applique on, as if it did have clay under it. Okay? But I'm going to shorten it a little bit. That's much better. And it's okay that it wraps around the side some. Normally I would cover this with a little bit of clay and then do it. But we're going to apply the chest plate. And I'm going to actually let you do your wings on your own, on either side. All right. I've pre-made a fistful again and made it into a pancake so that I can roll it out. My little handy roller. And don't roll this quite as thin as the skin of your owl, because it's an applique and we want it to show some depth. So you can do a little bit bigger than 1/8 of an inch. It's just a judgment call. You don't have to be perfect to make these. Remember, they're folk art. They're allowed to have flaws. We're not making yadros. Just keep rolling back and forth. Feel your middle, make sure it doesn't feel like a hump there. And we may have to re-roll our clay to get enough surface area to make the last wing. But what we're going to do is put our applique down. Let's try over here so we save the space for the wings. And just put it down there and it's going to stick for you. See that? Isn't that wonderful? Then we're going to take our pen, or you can actually use, is that it? No, that's not the other end of that one. Do I have it down there already? I'm just looking for my end with the X-Acto knife on it. I didn't want to put it facing up so I didn't cut myself. And now I'm having a hard time finding it. If you can't find an X-Acto knife, then just use your pen. Start and just follow your tracing, your template. And you're going all the way through to the glass of your cutting board, all the way through to the bottom. Try to stay as close to the paper as you can. And there I straight away, so I'm going to come back and cut again. Make sure I've got that line really clean cut. Okay? Now before I pull that apart, I'm going to do a wing. Or two, depending on how much room I have. I think I'll have enough. So I'm going to press this here, like that, and do the same thing. Does the camera see that, where I'm tracing this out with the pen? I hope you can see that. Trying to keep my hands out of the way, but it's almost impossible. Okay, so I've made, it looks like I might have a little trouble getting this one in here without going off the edge. So I'm going to take these two pieces that I have and neatly punch them out. Ta-da! There you go. And all there's left to do is to wind this back up, roll it out, and cut another wing. So I'm not going to show you that. I know you can do that on your own. But you say, oh, there's some rough edges here and everything. What are we going to do just to make that nice enough to put on our owl? And you can see the thickness too of this. It's thicker than the skin. You just take your finger and dip it in the clay, not in the clay, you dip it in the water, and you smooth the edges and you just keep doing that all the way around. And it takes off the, because you don't, no need to sand later. We're doing it now. We're sanding with water. And there's our wing. It's ready to be put on. Here's our chest plate. We're going to do the same thing to it. Get it smooth and pretty so that it can be applied. Alright. I like to apply the chest plate first because then you've got something centered that you can go by to place your wings and make them look more or less equal on either side. So now dip it into the water, because that's your glue. Like I said, that was going to be my mantra. So I am repeating myself on purpose. And just start pressing this into place. You're just going to press. Trust me, it will stick. Okay. And you're going to take the wing. I'll show you one side. You're going to wet it and apply it a little farther over with a space here. I like the tips to match when you start out. You see there? The chest plate tip and the wing tip are at the same height. The back wing will come down a little bit and it won't be quite as high. But that's fine. So kind of pretend that I covered my clay over here. See that? There you go. You've got a wing and a chest plate. But we have to make feathers. So while this is still damp and it's very easy to shape, we're going to take one of my favorite little tools is this. It's kind of like a sickle or half moon. And I use the tip of it to make my feathers. I start by pressing in like that. And I go all the way across, letting them each touch each other. It doesn't have to be perfect. See how that's coming? Now you're going to go take the second row, and you're going to press it in between those areas. Alright, while my cameraman was changing his battery, I took the liberty of continuing to press. You see those feathers showing up now? You're just pressing in between the row above. Every time you make a row, you go in between the feathers on the next row. There we are. Those are your feathers. Alright, we've completed the chest, and while you were gone, I put the wings on, and you use the same feather pattern for your wings as you did for your chest. Pressing, 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 and then in between the presses, you do your next pressing, and so on and so forth. Wings, either side, and your chest plate. I would let that dry for a little while first to get a little bit of crust on it, so that while we make the feet, it's not going to get damaged very easily. Alright, I have a little pre-prepared ball here for feet. This is about a 1/2 inch ball. I'm just looking for my pen. There it is. Of course, I'm going to cut it in half. Now this is going to be the base to attach your toes. Okay, I'm going to put the other half underneath to keep it fresh. And just start pressing this into kind of a semicircle with a flat top part and a round bottom part. This part won't even show when you're finished. It's just to help attach the toes. See that? That's all there is to it. Now you take another piece of clay, and I'm just taking this from spare pieces that we've cut off from the chest and wing appliques. Toes, you're going to just roll a noodle out, and sometimes the noodle will get too big and you can cut it in half so you know how much you're dealing with next time. And get your noodle rolled out real nice. And you don't want your toes too skinny because they break easily if you do. So this will probably do 2 or 3 toes. And we're only going to do 3 toes on each foot. So there you have that. We're going to go and we're going to cut a toe not that long. Leave that flat right there where you've cut it. Dip it into the water and attach it like so. Take this part, and this is where you can take a blending tool and kind of smush that flat part into the bottom of the foot. Then you're going to take, and I just do a toe at the time, don't be in a hurry. And I put little marks on the toes. Okay, so there's one toe. Yes, it looks like we're going to get 3 toes out of this. You do have to do a little fixing, like point the end of one side. And smush that flat again. Dip it. This is my middle toe. And I'm either going to press and smooth that in, use this to help smooth it if I need it, but I don't right now. I'm going to put my little toe marks with my pen on the toes. Take the last one. It's got a pointy end already. Smush it at the other end. Wet it. Oops, I bent my toe. It's okay, it'll go back. One, two, three. Now, I like to fold my toes a little bit. It's going to help support the owl in the long run once they're dry. I'm going to take this one foot that we've got here, dip the round part in water, see where we need to attach this so the toes come out at the right spot. So hold your owl straight up and down while you're doing this. Then you can turn it over and smooth this foot into the bottom, like so. Curl your toes, smooth everything. That's one side, already done. Then you take and do the same thing to the other side. For my toes, this is for my foot. This is another foot. I'm just making a semicircle with it. It's not going to show after you blend it in. It doesn't need to be perfect. Now I'm going to roll this out into toes for that side. So we just continue rolling out the toe. Do the same thing that we did to the other side. All right, now we have 2 finished feet. And later, the curled toes, see how they're curled here. I'm going to curl them a little more. That will help prop your owl up because he's front heavy and he wants to lean forward. So by having these toes here, that kind of stops that and you get a balanced owl. Now, after this is done and your back is covered, the whole owl needs to rest overnight to dry before you go on to staining. I mean, not staining, but painting the owl. What I want to say about painting is I happen to have one here that I made up ahead of time. Do it in the colors that you want. I'm a Halloween artist and I tend to do things in grays, blacks, and oranges. So this little guy was a Halloween owl. And here he is all painted. Pay attention just to the eye spot here. It's a pupil with a little white dot partway between the pupil and the iris, which is the gold part. That's going to make your eyes shine. See how he's all painted? Finished on the bottom. Everything is ready for now the staining. All right, so we're going to move right into that. There's our two owls. Look, his nose is a lot bigger than his nose. It doesn't matter. Everyone is a handmade piece. So what I've got here is my stain. I'm going to shake it a little bit because then I won't have to stir it so much. Something I want to mention too about painting is that I use little medicine caps or aspirin caps, whatever, and I save them and I repurpose them for squirting little bits of paint in here. Then I can just toss it when I'm through. I don't have to worry about rinsing it, washing it, and so on. So that's just a tip for the day. Just a little tip. Now you get your stain out. I'm using Minwax gel stain. What's so special about this stain is that it is gel. That means as you put it on, it doesn't run on down his face. It sticks where you put it. Okay? So that's real important. That's why I have never strayed from the Minwax gel stain. It works out perfectly. So we're going to open it up. A lot of times on hand, you'll have a handy little tool that'll help you to open things. This is the one I want. It's pretty stiff and we'll take this cap off. Now this is not water soluble. This is real stain petroleum product. All right? So if you don't like that idea, you need to find another stain that you're comfortable with. Get a stick of some sort and stir. Now comes the part we've been waiting for. This is where you're going to say, oh my gosh, have I ruined my owl? But no, you haven't. It just looks like it for a few minutes. I like to wear gloves when I stain because the stuff really gets under your nails and you look horrid for about a week until you get it off. Get a brush, maybe a foam brush or a brush you know that you're not going to use again. This one's too puffy for me to use. It came in a set and I can't use it for anything else, so I'm just going to stain with it. Make sure that you have your wipes ready. Remember, in the notes, I use Dad's old t-shirt and I cut it into maybe 6x6 or 8x8 pieces. And that's for wiping the stain off after we put it on. Also, we have Q-tips for the finer little areas to get the stain off of those. So here we go. Don't be scared. It will come off. But look what we're doing. And work as fast as you can because this stuff does dry. I'm going to do, of course, the front first. Get it completely covered. That means get it into all the cracks and crevices. because you want some of that stain to remain behind and accent the dimensions of the feathers, the depth of your templates. It's just kind of amazing when you take and wipe it off what remains behind. Now I'm just going to leave the toes separate for right now, because I'll get too entangled in them and not get my eyes clear. Okay, start by taking a cloth and wiping a grand amount off as you can, just to start off with. Look what's happening. Oh my gosh, it's looking so good already. Q-tips are for little areas that you have to get into along the side of the nose, around the eyes. You're going to like the way the stain sinks into the feathers and shows them off. So all you have to do is rub the top part of your feathers up and down and across, up and down and across, and look what you get. You get a lot of detail coming out from your sculpting. Just keep wiping. When you see some accumulating in areas you can't reach with the rag, grab a Q-tip, come around the edges, come around the edges here, here, behind your eyes, get behind your ears, just kind of like washing. What are you thinking of this? Is that not looking amazing? The stain changes everything. And I don't know of any other stain that will do it this good. If you feel like you've got too much stain in your feathers, just take and give your Q-tip a little twist and press, or press and twist. And you can take a little bit of the stain out of some of the feathers if you want to. That's just a personal decision, okay? I tend to leave a lot in, but I'm showing you how to take it out if you want to. Okay? Just take it out evenly across the board. There we have the front of it stained, and now we're going to do toes. I like to do them separate because they're little and they take lots of Q-tips. I'm going to go from underneath. And then I'm going to cover the tops. Oh, black toes. Really dirty birdie feet. Start wiping right away. And now we grab our Q-tips again. Just rub back and forth on your toes. The gold will start showing. Look at that. Amazing. You can get to the sides too. Go on over here. Get the other foot and the other toes. Take off or leave on as much stain as you like. It's really a personal preference. And of course you're going to go around the back like so after you've done that, so that everything is kind of covered and wiped while it's still wet. That makes it blend in better. I pick up another rag. And blend the stain in. There you have your owl. He's all stained. The next step is to let him dry fully in front of a fan for 6 to 8 hours or overnight. Again, because stain, it'll be sticky if you don't give it time. So we're going to give it time overnight, and then you're just going to get a nice brush like this, maybe a little wider, and you're going to apply your varnish, and this is going to seal and protect all your finishes and your paper clay. I use Ceramcoat Delta Creative matte interior varnish. Don't shake the bottle like you usually do. Turn it over gently. It'll get too many bubbles in it and they'll show up on your piece. That's how you shake this. It also comes in satin, so if you want a little shine to your owl, you can do that. I prefer the matte finish. And with that, I'm not going to show you how to do that because my owl is still wet. But I think you can handle that. Let it dry all the way, and you'll have a finished owl. If you see any spots that look like this retain too much stain still as you look him over, just keep a Q-tip in your hand to do that with. Look him over real good. Clean out his nostrils a little bit maybe. Whatever you want to do, however much stain you want to remove, it's up to you. And there you have it, our little Halloween owl. And tomorrow's Halloween,